Welcome to the Newtown Big Dreams podcast, an interview-style talk show that's your gateway to the fabulous and fascinating people who relocated to start a new life. Whether you're new to our podcast or your city, our fellow neighbors from across Canada, North America, and the entire English-speaking world share their stories of reaching new horizons and big dreams. So sit back and relax as we navigate in-depth and intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives, creatives, and anyone who can share their story about their Newtown big dreams. And now, here's your host, Luke J. Menkes.
She is in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, Angie is an award-winning content creator, and she's currently working on her first book. It's a travel memoir, possibly titled Flirting with Disaster. And I love the title, so we'll talk about that title. Her adventures have landed her on a Today Show, the New York Post, Cosmopolitan, AFAR, and Glamour. She is a sought-after speaker. She presents wild stories of travel misadventures at the New York Times Travel Show, TBEX, PRSA, and the Women in Travel Summit. Angie received her Bachelor of Science in Public Relations, French and Spanish from the University of Florida. Angie was a finalist for season 6 of The Apprentice, but she didn't make the last cut. And she was chosen out of 30,000 people to be a top 50 finalist for Australia's Best Job in the World campaign. Angie has created a website called angieaway.com. And of course, we'll have the links to everything in the show notes. At that website, Angie chronicles a year-long round-the-world trip that accidentally became a career. So today, she produces and co-hosts the Jet Sisters, which is a video series focusing on millennial travel. And she still shares travel tips, recipes, and rants on her website. So Angie, thank you for coming on the show. It's great to see you.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Yeah, it's nice to see a face that's not just, the people who live in my house.
Tell us, just to start, what is travel like these days? Because we know most of the world is on lockdown or some sort of lockdown. Are you still able to travel? I think Florida is pretty open.
Florida is very open. I will say, I think we had a very different experience from some of our friends in the North. We had shutdowns of sorts, but it was never fully locked down. And, it seems like it was a bit looser here. I actually spent the weekend at Disney camping with my family, socially distanced from other people, and we didn't go to the parks. But, the fact that Disney is open in Florida and hasn't been in California, and just we know that things are very different in Florida. And you can tell by the crowds because people have discovered that as well, and they're coming down and letting their kids run free in the campsite.
Beautiful
so yeah, it's good to see people getting out. I know how hard it must have been to really be stuck in the bad weather in tiny apartments. I used to live in New York City, so I can't tell you how many times I've said, thank the Lord I was not in New York for this, because having, 6 roommates in 200 square feet for months and months would have driven me up the wall.
Totally.
So I appreciate where I am this time,
I live in Western Canada, so it's pretty quiet. We're pretty much still locked down, but it's beautiful, like mountains, lakes, so we can go outside at least, and that's great. So,
yeah.
So you became a travel columnist, I guess you would say, travel writer, and almost by accident, you said in your bio. So tell us what happened. How did you get into this?
Well, I started out, my degree is in public relations. So I started out working at different agencies in Atlanta and then New York. And at my New York agency, I was on the travel team. So at the very startup of when travel blogs and just blogs in general were kind of getting hot, and brands were trying to figure out, how do we work with these people? Are they valuable? Can they bring something to the table that traditional media and advertising can't? And so we started working with bloggers, and a few years in, I was like, I am tired of sending all these other people to great locations to visit my clients. I'm like, I would really like to be the one who's having the fun and going the places. And I always wanted to be a writer. I just, I don't know. I think I needed permission to do it versus just going out and saying I was a writer. I needed some permission. And so I had a blog as soon as I moved to New York, and it did really well. And, you know, I had a lot of experience writing daily and just putting things into fun little story formats and entertaining people. And back then it was maybe 250 people reading, you know, it wasn't a lot. And and then opportunities came up and I said yes to everything that came my way. And one day I decided I want to travel far and wide, and I'm never going to be able to do that as an agency publicist because there's always something on fire. There's always an event. There's always something. And there's just no way I'm getting out of here to go to New Zealand or Australia or wherever I want. So I made a plan and I quit. And the plan was to be gone for a year and just, you know, write stories about the travel. And by the end of that year, it was, you know, my blog had taken off. And I thought, why did I put all this work in if I'm just going to go back and do what I was doing before? So I said, okay, let's do it again. Let's do another year and see where it ends up. And, you know, right place, right time, as far as blogging becoming something you could get paid for, because it wasn't when I started, and now it's part of my career. So, no, it's been a great and fun and uncertain past 10 plus years of just feeling my way in the dark. And just traveling and figuring it out.
That's awesome. I like what you said, just saying yes to opportunities that came your way. I think that's the key to life. So your book,
for sure.
Are you going to stick with the title Flirting with Disaster, or are you still bouncing around?
I'm not sure if that's up to me. I think that'll be up to my publisher once they sign me. But in my mind, that it makes a lot of sense. It's got a lot of legs because there's a lot in the book about romance and flirting and, you know, guys around the world. And there's a lot about disasters because the year that I traveled was just fraught with earthquakes and tsunamis and hurricanes and Arab Spring and revolutions and protests. And I was just missing, you know, apocalyptic stuff by weeks or days or hours. It was a super crazy year that I thought I was just going to go like sit by the pool and have some drinks in cool countries. And it really ended up being quite a lot more different than I expected. But yeah, and then my dad was in a cool band back in the day, and one of their hot singles was Flirting with Disaster. So it all kind of connects the dots. They may or not, you know, they probably won't keep that title, but we'll see. Right. I love it.
So I guess when you miss these major events by days or weeks, you got to talk to the local people about their experience going through it. So tell us maybe a couple of stories of some of the crazy stuff that you saw and the way people related those stories to you.
Gosh, where do I even start? I mean, my first week out, I was in Fiji and there was a tropical storm. And so I was just holed up on this tiny island with a family and their little resort. And so I got to learn everything about them, went to church with them, and didn't really get to do all the things that you do on that island. But I connected with the people, and now, you know, they've been friends for all these years. After that, I went to New Zealand and I stayed with family of a family friend. And loved them, stayed with them for a couple weeks, had all kinds of adventures, and then left and went to Australia. And after I left, the earthquake hit Christchurch. And, you know, hundreds of people died, and we didn't hear from them for a while, and it was really scary. So then, you know, I was staying with their family in Australia when that happened. So it was just all up in the middle of it. I feel sometimes like Forrest Gump, where I'm just in the middle of the news, and I'm like, I don't really want to be in the middle of the news, but you know, things happen. And then the tsunami in Japan. I was in Indonesia when that happened, so there were tsunami warnings, and it was very scary because it hadn't been too long since the Boxing Day tsunami. years before. And so, everyone's on edge. Everybody's really scared. And then there were some earthquakes. Then I got to Egypt, and it was a few months after the Arab Spring, but things had calmed down. And then I found out that, we were at the train station waiting for an overnight train, and there was a protest and a whole bunch of Coptic Christians were killed, like moments away from us while we were at the train station. So, and seeing the real people, we're tourists and we're going to Luxor and it's going to be so fun, but like, look around and you're really in the middle of these historic events that are very scary for people. And it's such an uncertain time, especially, in the Arab world. That was such a crazy year, with change and upheaval and drama. It was just a wild year.
Crazy.
Really. Yeah.
You talked about flirting. Are men very different from country to country compared to American men?
I'd like to say no. They're all pretty simple. Just kidding. I think there's good guys and bad guys in every culture. I think for a long time I was very attracted to the accents, and and eventually grew out of that quickly. Now married to the all-American boy, right. But I was like so snowed over by the English accent and the Australian accent, and then I realized these guys are idiots, and I wouldn't give them the time of day in Florida, but you just get kind of, they all sound like a Disney prince, right. But they're not. They're not. So, I learned a lot that year about men in other countries, and really relationships can be different from country to country. Culture of how men treat women and how men see relationships, that can be very different, even in like Western countries and Commonwealth countries.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah.
Like, how would British men be different? What did you say?
I don't know if I can give a specific example, but sort of, we see them as the cute Disney prince or, the Duke of whatever, and they see us as the girl from MTV. So I think American girls maybe get, especially especially smiley, fun, energetic American girls, kind of come with a reputation that maybe we don't actually have. There's an expectation that we're all like the music videos. And so I think there's probably some disappointment on both sides when they're not the Disney prince and I'm not the music video star. So, I think always figuring that stuff out. I always thought I would end up marrying somebody from abroad. Right. It just seemed like the thing that was going to happen. It made so much sense for me, and that did not happen. And it really, I applaud the people who make that work, because cultural differences are nothing to laugh at. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's not a joke. Those things are hard to overcome. Just little things that you think you might take it that someone's being rude, and really they're not. They're just like, in the South, a lot of times we'll say, "Oh, I don't care. Like, what do you want for dinner? I don't care." And my Canadian friend, who's from Montreal, was a bit offended that I was always saying, "I don't care," because she thought I was just being dismissive. But really it's deference. Yes. It's me saying, your opinion is more important than mine in this situation. And she just heard, "I don't care about what you think or what you want." So, you come around to those small things and you can figure it out. But I think you have to have quite a lot of self-awareness to do that across cultures.
So you sound a bit similar to me. I love traveling. I love visiting other places, but home is home. And I love coming home.
Home is home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Florida. Are you from Florida originally?
I am. I am from Jacksonville, Florida. When my parents brought me home from the hospital, they brought me to a house on the street I live on now. And my mother still lives there. So, I went all around the world and lived all kinds of places and ended up back on the street, my very first street ever, which is the strangest thing to me. I never thought I would come home. Never, ever. Like moving back to Jacksonville was just not something I was going to do. And I'm so glad that I left for as long as I did. I think I was gone for 12 years. I'm so glad I left, because I appreciate home so much more than I ever would have if that's all I'd ever known. And now I love being at home. I love traveling, of course, but home is my base. Home is where I don't have to, I'm here. I don't care. I'm not trying to do everything. And Jacksonville, I mean, there's stuff going on, but I don't need to do all of it.
Yeah.
Like New York, if I wasn't out seeing everything all the time, I felt like I was doing myself a disservice. Mm-hmm. But Jacksonville is very outdoorsy, and it's perfectly fine to hang out in your own backyard or just go to the beach or take a walk on the river. It's just nice. It's a really mostly chill place to live.
I lived in South Florida for 2 years, 96 to 98. And I don't know Jacksonville well. So I grew up in Eastern Canada, and every Christmas, my family would drive to Florida. So it's about 24 hours driving. So we do it over 3 days. So we do 8 hours, stay in a Holiday Inn, 8 hours Holiday Inn, 8 hours, then we're there. And my dad used to kind of joke when we were little kids. And he said, people actually live here. This is not just a vacation spot. And I thought, that's interesting. So I had a chance to move there in 96. I absolutely loved it. So how is Jacksonville different from South Florida?
Very different. The various big cities in Florida they're just so different. Jacksonville and Miami could be in different countries. South Florida has a totally different vibe. People go there for different things. Often when I tell people I'm from Florida, they think it's either Miami or like Mickey Mouse's actual house. That's all people know about Florida. But Jacksonville is basically South Georgia. Beautiful, outdoorsy, cooler in the winter, which is nice. We have a little bit of winter, still not a real season, but nothing like South Florida where it's 80 or 90 most days. I kind of appreciate it might be cold on Christmas, some years we wear shorts, some years it's actually freezing. So we don't get a lot of snow or anything like that, but it feels much different than South Florida. And it even feels much different than Orlando. I was there yesterday. It's only a 2-hour drive, but it's a whole world away.
So 2-hour drive. And how far are you from Savannah, Georgia? I think is the nearest city. Right?
Yeah.
In Georgia.
I think we're 2 hours from Savannah.
And I think about 6 hours down to Miami.
Yeah, about. And same to Atlanta, 5 or 6 hours to Atlanta. So decent driving distance to lots of big hubs and, but we're right here. We have beaches. I feel like Jacksonville is the last big city in Florida that's not overly touristed. We don't, we have tourists and we have plenty of people visiting, but we don't cater as a city to that crowd, where Orlando is basically, it's come here, visit us, and then leave. Jacksonville is really a place to live that people like to also visit.
Tell us about your experience on The Apprentice. So you say you were almost a finalist, but that means you almost got on the show. Like you weren't on the show and almost made it to the end. You almost made it to the show.
Right.
So
So I went through many, many rounds of interviews. And I happened to have the day off that they were doing open interviews in Atlanta. And so a friend of mine wanted to try out, and I was like, yeah, I'll go with you. Whatever. I don't know anything. I was like 22 or 23, just goofing around, and then they liked me and they kept calling and I kept having more auditions. And then they were like, okay, you've made the top 50. Wow. We're flying you out to California to be sequestered for a week. You can't tell anyone where you're going. You can't talk to anyone while you're there. Like, how am I going to get a week off, with a moment's notice? And so it was this whole big thing. Very exciting, but you're in your hotel room the whole time, except when you're going to interview or do like psychological testing or whatever it was. We had breakfast and all our meals in the same room with all the other finalists, but no one could talk. So, just what a strange experience. Yeah, it was really weird. And then the very last thing I did on the last day was interview with Trump. And they didn't tell us he was going to be there. And we just walked into the room. I kind of figured he would. And it was me and 4 other girls. And it was very much like the boardroom, everyone went around and introduce themselves. And then Trump said, he asked me, well, why do you think she shouldn't get hired?
Right.
I was like, I don't know. I'm like, she seems really
I always found
nice.
that
I don't know.
interesting where you see how you react to firing someone else.
Yeah. And at that point, I hadn't yet moved to New York. I hadn't really found my assertive sea legs, so to speak. So I was just like, I don't know, she seems pretty nice. But, I said, my qualifications are this and this and this. So I turned it back to, here's why I think I would be good. I really, even to this day, I don't think I'd be able to throw somebody under the bus for absolutely no reason. And I was, dressed very professionally, and I took it very seriously. And, in hindsight, we know a lot more about reality TV now than we did then. So it wasn't so much a job interview as it was a drama
like an audition
test to
sort of,
to see if you were going to bring the right kind of drama. And I'm not that dramatic. So I didn't make it, and I was very disappointed at the time. But it set me up to, as other opportunities came, I was like, why not me? Why shouldn't I try it? It really gave me such a boost of confidence that I made it that far, even though, it was hardly a reflection of my brains or my expertise, because I didn't have that much expertise at the time. But, it just gave me a lot of confidence. And then I was like, I'm moving to New York. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And everything that came up, I tried after that.
So you've seen the show, I'm sure. Is he the same on the show as he was in that boardroom? Pretty much the same.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see him for very long, but it was very on brand. It was poking and seeing who would break and who would be mean. And did you say you're fired, or did he just say, I'm sorry, it didn't work out? And he didn't say it. I kind of knew when I didn't take the bait, and then the other girls did, they were quite ruthless. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing here. So I knew, we left and everybody said bye. And then we went and waited in our hotel rooms for them to give us the yay or nay. And I knew I was already packing my stuff. I was like, I wasn't mean enough. I wasn't prepared for that. So, but no big deal. I didn't actually get fired by Trump, but close enough.
Close enough. Wow. Well, that's amazing. So what are the hot travel destinations this year? I'm sure Florida is on the top of the list because it's open. I've heard Texas is almost completely open now, and several states are open.
I think more open. Yeah. I would say places like Costa Rica, where you don't need a test to get in. Now, to go back to the US, you do need a test to get in. It's quite expensive, and it's a pain to get it all done, so it's a little tricky. And where else? I know there's quite a few places in the Caribbean. I think that's going to be really hot this year, just because it's close, at least for the US, for the Western Hemisphere, easier to get to. You don't have to spend as much time on a plane. I think the far-flung destinations are, say maybe the Maldives or Tahiti. Unless you're really dedicated, those ones are going to be less popular, just because it's more time on a plane, more time in an airport. If you want to mitigate risk and just be in enclosed areas less, less time, then you might pick a 2-hour flight to Jamaica versus 36 hours on the way to the other side of the world.
And I know a lot of my friends are not really worried about COVID, but they don't want to wear a mask for 12, 13 hours on an airplane,
Right. It's very uncomfortable, right? Like,
so
not awesome.
Quarantining when you come back and testing and all that stuff. So
it really adds so many layers of difficulty to traveling that, to me personally, it's almost not worth it. Any traveling I'm doing in the next few months is going to be work related. We're really not going anywhere just for fun, because it's not fun when you're the planner of the trip and your whole concern is like, okay, are we going to be able to get a COVID test? And what paperwork do we have to have? And do we have to have separate travel insurance? Like, way to suck all the fun out of it. I'd rather, and I mean, lucky me, I do live in Florida. So I can say, I'd just rather stay home in my vacation destination where I live. And that's fine. But I totally understand why people do it. And, there's been so much arguing and controversy in my industry, in the travel writing space, where, half of my friends are infuriated about people traveling for any reason, work, like for any reason. They're just like, you should not be leaving your house. And then I've got friends that have been to 10 countries in the past year.
Yeah.
And they're doing it safely and they're following the guidelines, but there's just such a different perspective depending on sides. And I don't know, I feel like it's very much a case by case basis. It's a personal decision. If you're following all the instructions that the CDC or whoever gives you, then I don't know why you couldn't travel, but there's always the chance of spreading it. And I don't know, it's all so difficult. I don't think I have I don't have just one opinion on it. It's very case by case for me.
I completely agree with you. And part of the problem for me as a person who loves to travel is I'm not posting on Instagram or Facebook about it because there's someone out there that's going to get really pissed off. So
for sure,
part of the fun is just showing off a little bit and saying, check out these palm trees and whatever. And I'm kind of restrained. So that's kind of your business. Does that present a challenge for you when you're?
Oh, it's been incredibly challenging. It's felt like a tightrope all year. My sister, we had her bachelorette party last August, maybe September, and we went to the Florida Keys, and that was our first trip really since everything started. And some people were like, how dare you go anywhere? And other people were like, oh yeah, Florida's great because you can actually go do and see things semi-carefully. There's still a lot of rules in place, but it's been a tightrope. And I've had friends, like some of the ones who've been to many countries in the past year, they're getting eviscerated, absolutely like crucified on social media. And then there's people like me who, I still need to share things on my social platforms. Otherwise Instagram's going to forget about me. And when it comes time to come back, I won't be there or they won't be showing my stuff to people. So we do try to keep up with travel content. But there's been folks that are angry, even if you just say, hey, in a year, go to Jamaica. There's people that are like, how dare you promote travel at a time like this? And, it's really been such a fight. It's internally in this industry, it's rough. There's people that say you don't need to go to Mexico. That's a colonial viewpoint. They don't need you. And if they do need you for tourism reasons, then that's because of colonialism. And, it goes back so far and maybe now they need to do better and not rely on American tourists. And I'm like, well, that's a lot to fix in 1 year.
Yeah.
Where everything's nuts, right? Like we've got so much to worry about. And so I see a lot of the perspective is, I'm going to say a Caribbean island that their tourism is decimated, and that's what they all rely on. So that, their tourism's down 99%. That's a lot of people that don't have food and money and taxes and room nights and all that kind of stuff. So I totally see that perspective. Like spending tourism dollars is great, but I also see, are we carrying a disease to an island that doesn't have the beds and the infrastructure? I can't remember which island it was, but I was talking to somebody's PR rep and they said they have 4 ICU beds on the island. That's it. So if you have an outbreak and your entire, let's say elderly population catches it, there's no help. There's no getting everybody off the island and sending them somewhere else because everybody else's hospitals are full too. So it's really been a year of just like, what are the ethics of travel in a pandemic? And what if it is your job? What do you do?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm kind of a libertarian, and I think if the country and the government in that country says, come here, here's our protocol, please come, then I want to go. I don't think it's for a Canadian or an American to tell me what relationship I have with Jamaica, right? It's up to those people and myself, right? But that's just one opinion. And I guess one of the fortunate things is we live in a beautiful country, United States, Canada. So there's some great destinations within the United States. Are you focusing this year on more American destinations?
Absolutely. My web traffic, so of course it crashed and burned, and it was terrifying last March when no one was looking at any travel at all. So it's come back, and I'm very happy about it. But the majority of our stuff that's popular now, our stories that are popular, are domestic. Really, that's road trips and the parks, you know, the theme parks, of course, because people are still going to those. But it really is domestic. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to get on a plane and go somewhere far flung. I'll probably write some stories from past trips that on places that are more accessible, like Costa Rica, maybe like Mexico. So if people are planning trips there, they can at least have some information that's fresh and updated. But yeah, I think domestic it makes sense to me that it's going to be mostly domestic stuff.
What
the next few months, you know,
looking forward to domestically?
Oh gosh, national parks are just my bucket list now. I want to go to all of them, and I love them. And, you know, we'll see if we have any time. It's really, there's not many close to Florida. I mean, you can go to South Florida and go to the Everglades and those, but obviously we've been to those. So now it's like you have to go out west, and it's such a hike out west. And then, you know, there's 5 of them, in Utah, something like that. I don't have time. You know, you can't see them all. So I'm like, how do we do it? It's a logistical situation. And, you know, with COVID, that makes everything just, there's those extra layers of, you have to book things in advance, you know, and how far in advance. And I don't want to go all the way to Utah and then find out there's nowhere to eat and nowhere to park. You know what I mean? Because everybody's road tripping. So there's many layers that you have to think about if you're going anywhere now.
For sure. So how often do you go to Orlando, and which theme park do you like better, Disney or Universal?
Oh, gosh. That is such a loaded question. I'll tell. So my sister lives there now. She just got married, and she and her husband live there. So I'm there probably once a month, if not a bit more. It used to be once a week because I actually worked with Universal for almost 10 years on different projects. And I love Universal. I really do. The Wizarding World of Harry Potter is, you know, hands down the gold standard in how to create a thematic land within a theme park. Just so creative and wonderful. And I like the rides there. You know, I like the more grown up roller coasters, and I like the fast stuff. But I do love Disney because I grew up going to Disney, and that was the ultimate. When we were kids, like, that was the ultimate thing that our parents could do with us, was take us to Disney. And it's funny because we were there this weekend to celebrate my mom's birthday, and we went to Fort Wilderness because we went there as kids. And so we all just went and sat in the woods and didn't even go to the parks, and just like had a good old nostalgic time. And it really is, it's nostalgic for us. The last trip we went on before the pandemic, we were on a Disney cruise when everything shut down, and which was an interesting experience. But I mean, my sister and I were like, you know, we don't have kids. Let's see if this is really going to be fun. And we had so much fun as adults on a Disney cruise. It was just, you know, as magical as it was when we were kids. So, you know, I'm just a theme park aficionado in general. I'm such a fan. And people think that's weird because I'm a world traveler, that I think theme parks are great, but I do. I don't know if it's because I'm a Floridian or what, but I just love them. They're fun.
Have you been to Disneyland in California?
I haven't been to Disneyland in California, but I have been to Disneyland Paris, which is a whole different experience. Totally different? Yeah. It's much smaller, like much more manageable on a walking and feet health situation. But it was different. It was a long time ago. It was when I studied abroad that I went and dragged my friends who were like, really? Disney? Like, we have to. I'm from Florida. We must.
So you mentioned the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Is that at Disney or is that Universal?
That's Universal.
Do you have any insider tips if someone's going over there?
I have so many insider tips.
Give us a couple.
I don't even know where to start. I would say bring a ton of money, because for souvenirs and stuff, if you're, you know, a Harry Potter fan. I would also say watch the very first movie, which I think is the Sorcerer's Stone. Watch that the week before, the night before, because there are so many things that'll jump out at you if it's fresh in your mind. so many details, and just, you'll remember a lot more, and it'll sink into your mind better. And then I would say bring money for a wand. The real wand that does real magic, because that's just fun. There's all these different magic tricks you can do and spells you can cast around the two lands. There's so many things. And there's the map you get when you get your wand. If you take it into Nocturne Alley, different magic tricks pop up, and you'll be able to see them if you go in that special area. Yeah. So
is that like a full day thing, or is it a couple hours, or?
I think it probably depends on how crowded it is and how much you like Harry Potter. I mean, you could absolutely just whip through and ride some rides and not get it, but there's enough detail for someone who's interested in Harry Potter, and there's enough different food and rides that you could stay there. You could fully just do the two different Wizarding World lands, because one is in Islands of Adventure and one is in Universal Studios itself. And you could just do that. You really could do that forever.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. So cool.
So last thing I want to ask you about, you're a Britney Spears fan, as I am. And there's a movement called Free Britney. Now, tell us about that, because I know a little bit, but I'm sure you know a little bit more than I do, and most of our listeners. So what is Free Britney? What's that about?
So Free Britney is a movement. I think it's been, it started out as just a few people rumbling about, like, where did Britney go and what's going on with her. She's been in a conservatorship, a legal conservatorship, with her father as the conservator of her person and her financial estate for 10 or 12 years, quite a long time. You may remember that she had a very public sort of, I don't want to call it a meltdown, but she was really driven into a situation that she couldn't win. There was a divorce and there was a custody battle, and the poor girl just could not catch a break. She went from America's sweetheart to really vilified, and every move she made was scrutinized. And so if she did have a meltdown, she certainly earned it, and because of that, there were some unsavory characters in her life, and her dad and her lawyers, I guess, decided that she was incapable of making decisions for herself and taking care of her own business decisions. Usually when someone is put into a conservatorship, they have dementia or, are 90 years old, and like I said, unsavory characters are coming in and stealing their money or selling their house out from under them. So that's basically what Britney's dad said was happening, is that she was incapable of running her own life or making decisions. And I think they really held her kids over her head and said, you won't see your kids unless we do this. And so next thing you know, she's in this legal conservatorship that she can't get out of. And she works so hard. She's bringing in tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds, a year on products, tours, Vegas residencies. And that's just unheard of for someone in a legal conservatorship to make that much money and work that hard and be that capable of performing every night and being a brand. That's just not how conservatorships are designed. So people got really, people started wondering what's going on with Britney. She was supposed to do a new residency in Vegas, and it didn't happen. And then she checked into rehab, and, it was super shady. And it turns out that we're pretty sure that her dad forced her into this rehab situation because she was no longer taking medication. Like, a lot of this is speculation, and I don't know all the proof, but there's podcasts out there that have the receipts. They've got the legal documents, and they know there have been phone calls and voicemails left by anonymous people that know what's going on inside of the facility. And at this point, she has asked that her father not be the conservator. Her kids have a restraining order against their grandpa because of an abusive incident. So this man who's supposedly in charge of Britney because she can't take care of herself is now one of the reasons that she can't see her kids. And that doesn't seem fair at all. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine making $100 million a year, but you're not capable of, like, going to Target and spending however much money you want at Target, or driving your car or using your phone?
She's got restrictions on her personal freedom and on her money. So she gets basically an allowance.
Yeah, it's a small allowance at that. She can't just like decide to go to Hawaii for the weekend. She's got to get all these approvals from people that she is forced to pay to take care of her, but she doesn't want them. So she's got this, you know, this swarm of hangers on, and including her father, which I can't imagine how traumatic it is to know that it's your dad that's basically stealing from you and keeping you in this cage. It's very Disney princess. It's very, you know, Princess Jasmine or Rapunzel locked in the tower kind of stuff. And she continues to be forced to make money to support all these people. So she's now said, I will not work again until my dad is not my conservator anymore. And he's still pushing for it. And I feel like every 60 or 90 days they have a hearing and everybody shows up and the judge punts it down the road, you know, 60 to 90 more days. Let's check it out in 60 days and see. Brittany still doesn't want her dad to be the conservator, you know, and they've made some small steps. I believe that there's an actual bank in charge of her money now instead of her dad, which is a good step. But he really needs to not be her conservator. If she's afraid of him and she doesn't want that, she's not even saying, I don't want a conservatorship. She's saying, give me someone else because I don't want him. And that may be that may lay the groundwork for her to get rid of the conservatorship altogether. But they called it in court documents a hybrid business model, this conservatorship. And that's disgusting. So like a person is not your meal ticket. You know, a person who deserves a conservatorship should not be being exploited, you know, like a circus animal.
That sounds like slavery. It's pretty terrible.
It
Does she need a new lawyer? Like, what is how is this going to end?
So she has attempted to have her own lawyer, but there were closed documents and meetings, and she had this lawyer that she wanted to be her lawyer. And the judge said, you know, I have seen some evidence and I'm not going to tell you what it is, lawyer. And she is not capable of choosing her own lawyer. So once you're in a conservatorship, you are not your own person anymore.
Nuts.
So I don't know how they got her into, I mean, she was clearly going through a bad time when she shaved her head. Like, you know, she's crying in restaurants holding her baby. How could we do that to somebody? Like, as a society, it makes me so sad. And, you know, there's the documentary out there that the New York Times did called Framing Britney Spears. And it's just disgusting. And we see it happening again and again. It happened with Princess Diana. She's everybody's favorite little sweet, you know, princess. Oh, and then she gets an opinion and everybody's mad about it. And let's blame it on her. And now what? She's dead. And it's happening with Meghan Markle. And, you know, you get this ingenue and everybody loves her, and then they vilify her when she doesn't live up to every expectation. That's unreal. It's so sad. You know, we think we can treat celebrities differently because they have money or fame. And this girl is locked in her house by her dad and forced to work for hundreds of millions, you know, like, I mean, I saw her show in Vegas years ago and it was incredible. You don't have dementia and be able to do something like that, you know? You just don't. So I don't know. I hope she can get out of it and eventually tell her story and get to see her kids. Yeah. You know, it's just a really unfair situation.
Totally. So hashtag Free Britney, if you want to learn more about it. And there's websites and there's podcasts dedicated to this topic. So fascinating topic. It's hard to believe that still happens and she can't get a judge to actually look at this thing honestly and transparently, but that's what it is right now. So
it makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes and who's greasing whose palms with Britney's money. Yeah. You know, it's not even their money. I think her dad makes $500,000 a year. Yeah.
To play this role.
To tell her.
Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's the saddest thing.
Totally horrible. But let's leave it on a positive note. You've got so many fascinating stories to tell. You've got a great website called angieaway.com. People can, now you're going to talk about your book release there. Do you have a ETA for the book?
You know, I don't. It's the first draft is done. Really, I'm just going through the getting a publisher. So, you know, I'm on the precipice of signing on the dotted line, but
have you thought of
we just have
publishing?
I've thought about it, but I would just love to, at least with my first book, I would just love to have a publisher behind me with all their resources. I could absolutely, with a PR background, I could absolutely do that myself and I could edit it and all that. But I want the team, I really want the experts to step in and make it the best it can be. I really value the outside insight. So
for sure. So will you keep us posted? Will you keep us posted about the book on the website?
I will. Yeah. Oh, for sure. And my email, I have an email list, and of course I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and all the places, Perfect. Angie Away or the Jet Sisters. That's where you can find
Perfect.
us.
Okay. So I'm going to put those links in the show notes. So if someone's on the treadmill, they can just tap on it and go straight there. They don't have to stop and write something down.
Yes, I have lots of Harry Potter tips on there, Wizarding World tips, if anybody is headed to Orlando.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, it was great talking to you today. It looks like it's a beautiful sunny day there in Jacksonville. And we've got the same here, probably about 10, 15 degrees cooler, but still a beautiful day here too. So I've really enjoyed talking to you today, Angie.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Newtown Big Dreams podcast with your host, Luke Menkes, and his authentic guests. And we love our listeners and hope you subscribe now to learn more about the amazing journeys of our incredible guests who relocated to find a new town, big dreams. And remember, make your dreams big.